Is everything working? A test, test, test. There we go. Cool. So yeah, tonight we're not doing a game or anything. Didn't feel like it, and so I'm going to be doing an audiobook here. But because of recording and things, I am trying to minimize the computer usage, so I'm not using the hands, as you can see. Hopefully the computer won't be too loud as I record. I won't have to turn off my camera. So, let's get into it. You're the loser of the story, and you lose the story, and I'm the jock. All right. This is the Darkest Eclipse trilogy. It is a Wings of Fire fan fiction that I've been working on. So let's go ahead and tap into Adobe Audition. Okay. That's a pretty significant background noise from the computer. And that's the fans from the VTubing avatar. So let's pull out of here. Hop into another chapter, just grab some random audio. Wait, actually. Chapter 13. Oh! Peacemaker! Kinkaju's voice echoed through the air as Peacemaker almost jumped up into the air in surprise. Alright, so now I got a clip of audio there. Asmodeus, I'm grabbing a drink. Right, yeah, Asmodeus, I did that. I am not a scaly, just because I like a book series. Now, if I like Twilight, we have another issue entirely. Chapter 7. So if I were to rack up all of that so that... Chapter 13. Chapter 13. Oh! Peacemaker! Cold. Into the air in surprise. Cold. So. A few more, I think. Something like that. Chapter 13. Oh! Peacemaker. Wrong time. Alert. No, not really. I'm doing some audio tests right now and recording and things. Almost jumped up into the air in surprise. Gosh. Chapter 13. To someone that doesn't know my audio, that background noise probably isn't that big of a deal to them. But to me, it is quite a bit. So where to cut it. Pikachu's voice echoed through the air as Peacemaker almost jumped up into the air in surprise. Oh, you guys can... Let's boost up the desktop audio, I think. Chapter 7. Yeah, a bit. Cold. Anyway, so... Almost jumped up into the air in surprise. Chapter 7. So loud right there. Nothing over here. And that's because my computer's fan is going quite a lot because of the VTubing avatar. So, yeah, angry is definitely the right expression right now because I want to keep it because that way you guys have something you can look at. At least something. But I want the audio to actually sound good. So, we're killing that. And my computer's already a lot quieter. In comparison, let's go ahead and record that same line again. Chapter 13. Oh, Peacemaker! Kinkaju's voice echoed through the air as Peacemaker almost jumped up into the air in surprise. Right there. Chapter 13. Chapter 13. So, a little bit higher. Jumped up into the air in surprise. Chapter. Yeah, it's a big difference anyway. All that just to say, I will not have my video on tonight. I apologize, but well, I want to make a good product, so let's get into this. Oh, right, Kinkaju's voice first. I probably actually need to go reference that, so... When was the last time I actually did Kinkaju? Oh, wait, it's Kinkaju. Friggin', I know who Kinkaju's voice is. It's super overeager and energetic for no frickin' reason. Chapter 13. Oh, Peacemaker! Kinkaju's voice echoed through the air as Peacemaker almost jumped up into the air in surprise. Reaching out for that pot... Whoops. Reaching out for the pot that held the strawberry plant, he stopped it from falling to the floor of the Nightwing greenhouse. Sighing in relief as he looked at his table of fruits, vegetables, and herbs, Peacemaker looked out of the door of the building and was greeted with the sight of a yellow and pink adult Rainwing stepping inside, her contagious grin on her face. Peacemaker could not help but smile at the Rainwing, who had been one of his caretakers since his hatching. While she could be loud and could ask 100 questions per minute, Peacemaker loved her presence almost as much as he loved Moon's. For what reason she came to the Nightwing village was beyond Peacemaker. However. Wasn't she supposed to be helping Queen Glory with something? Hello! Kinkaju greeted him while wrapping her wings around him in an embrace. It's so good to see you, Rainbow Wings! As always, Kinkaju's nickname for him made Peacemaker laugh. He had multicolored star membranes on his wings, but he'd hardly call them rainbows. But when Kinkaju set her mind on something, there was hardly much you could do to discourage her. So, he just let her call him Rainbow Wings, as it was a nice nickname. Where have you been? Where have you been? Peacemaker asked as he backed away from Kinkaju's hug and moved over... What the frick? And moved her over to a cushion. Okay. Peacemaker asked as he backed away from Kinkaju's hug and moved her over to a cushion to sit on while he went back to taking care of the fruits and vegetables. I was hoping you would be here when I got back home from school. While he did not remember the last few days of the term at Jade Mountain, which was strange, you would think he'd remember bidding Zwing farewell for the winter holidays. He remembered how Kinkaju had not visited him when he returned home to the rainforest. He had been disappointed. But now, here she was. The disappointment had all but dispersed. Well, you know, Kinkaju said as she sat down comfortably. The Queen needed her best friend, which would be me, to deliver something special to Prosperity. And how did that go? Did you see Moon and Kibbley? Oh, it went perfectly, Kinkaju answered. I am the most reliable of the Queen's messengers. Once again, that grin of Kinkaju's appeared. As for Moon and Kibbley, you could say they, Just as Kinkaju spoke, Peacemaker saw the Rainwing freeze in mid-sentence. Before he could ask if Kinkaju was feeling all right, Peacemaker noticed that the entire environment had turned a dark shade of gray, all the color draining from the world around him, except for his own scales. Yet, just as Peacemaker was about to panic about what was happening, he saw two dragons come through the entrance of the greenhouse. Rubbing his eyes, Peacemaker saw that, like himself, the colors of the dragon's scales were normal, rather than being enveloped in the gray aura. Upon closer inspection of the two dragons, Peacemaker recognized the Sea-Wing and Skywing that entered the greenhouse. Cliff? Tempest? Peacemaker said, all the while feeling his eyelids grow heavy. What were they doing here? Shouldn't Cliff be home in the Sky Kingdom? And wasn't Tempest at home in Aderin? No, no. The last he'd seen both of them was in the common cave back at Jade Mountain, right when it was time for bed before they were to enter the dream world. Oh, he was dreaming. They hadn't entered the dream world yet. Peacemaker walked past the dream version of Kinkajou and made his way to his friends. Glancing at Cliff and Tempest, the Rainwing-Nightwing hybrid glanced between Cliff and Tempest. Well, that there is an oopsie by the author. Glancing at Cliff and Tempest, no. The Rainwing hybrid glanced between Cliff and Tempest. He remembered how the two had been angry with each other after something he had done when they were awake. Cliff paid no mind to Tempest as he walked past the Sea-Wing and approached Peacemaker. His red eyes examined the greenhouse, the prince nodding as he looked almost impressed. So, is it really like this? Cliff asked. Almost, Peacemaker replied, looking back at the greenhouse. This is what it looked like before I left for the academy. Making sure that its growing spaces were filled with enough fruits and vegetables grown and prepared for the Nightwing village, Peacemaker wanted to make sure that way he still contributed. Yeah, it's not... I mean, overall, it's easy to read, but sometimes it gets a bit wordy and mouthfully. Let's see, where was I? Making sure that his growing spaces were filled with enough fruits and vegetables and prepared for the Nightwing village. Peacemaker wanted to make sure that way he still contributed to the village's food supply. When he returned home, he expected his work space would be much more vacant. Wow, I like it, Cliff said, positioning himself so he could stand beside Peacemaker and nudge him in the shoulder. Peacemaker grinned at his friend's nudge. Tempest stepped forward, giving him a small smile. Peacemaker, are you ready? She asked. Even though he remembered spending the rest of his time awake, mentally preparing himself for his journey into the dream realm, Peacemaker would be lying to himself if he said that he was not nervous about what would come. The only time he'd been to the dream world was when he had been dragged into it by whatever had had a hold of him during the quarter break. Even with Tempest and Cliff accompanying him, he was still apprehensive. Yet, after what he had nearly done to his friends mere hours before, Peacemaker was not willing to take chances. Ready or not, he was going. Yeah, Peacemaker nodded after collecting his thoughts. I'm ready. Stay close, Tempest replied, holding out her wings to both him and Cliff. Without hesitation, Peacemaker walked up to the Sea-Wing and let her drape a wing over his shoulder. Despite the anger he showed towards Tempest, Cliff had approached her with little hesitation and let her drape a wing over him. Then, just like before, Peacemaker felt like his body had fallen into warm water. His surroundings vanished, becoming nothing but light around him. Despite not seeing much around him, he could feel as though his body was moving faster than a skywing in mid-flight. This sensation made him both excited and dizzy. Very dizzy. Cliff! Cliff! Peacemaker heard Tempest's voice speak through the light. Do not let go! I can't! Was all that Peacemaker could hear from his friend. Cliff? Cliff? Peacemaker called out to the Skywing Prince. What's wrong? Cliff muttered tiredly. Peacemaker felt Tempest shift beside him. Cliff! Next thing Peacemaker knew, he could no longer feel Tempest beside him, and he felt as though he were spinning in midair. Desperately trying to understand what was happening, Peacemaker reached out with his talons for anything to grab a hold of. Yet, all his talons could reach was the space. Yet, all his talons could reach was empty space. Tempest! Cliff! Peacemaker called out desperately for his friends. Yet, there was no answer. However, Peacemaker knew one thing. His surroundings were slowing. and the surrounding light dimming. Then, he felt it. The feeling of his body hitting water, followed by a loud splash. All of Peacemaker's surroundings grew dark as his body no longer felt like it was spinning. Now, it felt like he was falling. Looking towards the sky, Peacemaker's eyes widened in shock. The skyline. It looked like the surface of water, as if one were to look up at the water's surface when completely submerged. Above the water, Peacemaker could see various lights that filled up the night sky, despite it seeming that he was underwater. He knew one thing. He was falling, with no signs of stopping. Looking down at the ground, Peacemaker saw a shadow covered. Looking down at the ground, Peacemaker saw a shadow-covered landmass. A shadow-covered landmass. The ground rapidly approaching. Repositioning his body, Peacemaker attempted to open his wings to slow his descent. As his wings opened, he felt horror wash over his body when he realized something. He felt no wind under his wings. He was not stopping. Just as panic consumed him, Peacemaker felt talons grab a hold of his shoulder, causing his descent to slow. Looking up at what had grabbed him, he was greeted with the sight of Tempest. The glow around her scales had lessened, the glow appearing more like an outline rather than engulfing glow. Beside her was Cliff, who had a red outline around his body. Tempest held onto his arm as well. Whatever had happened, the Skywing Prince looked like he would be sick. "Are you all right?" Tempest asked. "Yeah," Peacemaker answered, turning his gaze back to Cliff. "What happened?" "I'm fine," Cliff murmured. I felt so dizzy." "It can happen to anyone," Tempest explained. "Some dragons tolerate the transition better than others." "Wow, that's great to hear," Cliff groaned sarcastically. For the next few minutes, the three of them drifted towards the shadowed ground below them. As they drew closer to the ground, Peacemaker noticed that the specific area of the landmass they were heading towards appeared to be mountainous. Almost like the region of Jade Mountain. No, it was Jade Mountain. The three dragons eventually touched the ground, their talons touching the cliffside that looked almost like the southern entrance to the academy. Turning his gaze south, Peacemaker could see the forest valley that was a popular hunting ground for the students of the academy. In the trees, he could see the faint glows of light coming from somewhere within the branches, brightening up the shadowed environment where the reflection of the moons could not. Tempest walked up beside him, staring out at the horizon with him, followed by Cliff. "Welcome," Tempest began, "to the realm of dreams." "It almost feels like we're awake," Peacemaker said, looking over at Tempest. "Why does this place look like our world?" "Because it mirrors our own," Tempest said. "Dragons cross to this realm when we sleep, but few are aware of it while they dream." "Sounds complicated," Cliff muttered. His voice was still tired, but it sounded better. "It is," Tempest admitted, turning away from the direction they had been looking at, and made her way to the cave entrance. "But I can say this. Our answers will be here. We can find out what has been happening to Peacemaker with a clearer view of his dreams, rather than being inside them." "How so?" Peacemaker asked, as he and Cliff followed Tempest through the cave entrance. Despite having just arrived in the dream world, Peacemaker was glad that it at least resembled the real world. "Why couldn't we just go through my dreams?" Because the dreams themselves are like a box," Tempest explained. "When a somnus enters another dragon's dreams, we can alter the dreams as we see fit, yes, but on a minor level. we do not see the entire picture by submerging ourselves into them. So, we need to be outside of the box, with a sky view. Peacemaker glanced at Cliff, wondering if he understood what Tempest was talking about. But the frown on his face confirmed that he was just as lost as Peacemaker was. All of this talk about boxes. If they were in the dream world, shouldn't they be in dreams or something? Shouldn't they be in dreams or something? Peacemaker wanted to understand. When the three dragons walked through the halls of the dream version of the academy, Peacemaker and Cliff froze as a shadowed figure turned a corner and was walking straight towards the three dragons. What the? What the? Cliff shouted until Tempest held up her talons towards him. It's Clay, Tempest said immediately. What? Peacemaker asked, looking back to the shadowy figure who had the shape of Mudwing with a limp. The dream world is a reflection of our world. Inhabitants of this world can still see those who are awake, but not as clearly as when they are awake. Tempest explained just as Clay walked past them without even a glance. To the inhabitants of this world, we are nothing but shadows when we are awake. Peacemaker continued to look at the retreating figure of the Academy's defense instructor. He was understanding, at least. They could see what was happening to those awake. But what about those who were sleeping? This question was answered as Tempest led Cliff and Peacemaker to what would be the Court's Winglet's common cave. As they entered the familiar surroundings, Peacemaker saw the two dragons present in the center of the cave. But unlike Clay, who had appeared as a shadowy figure, Peacemaker could fully see all the features of the two dragons that were sleeping in the middle of the cave. It was Hyena and Alligator. Both the Sandwing and Mudwing were curled up next to each other, their backs pressed against one another. Peacemaker recalled how he had last seen the two studying together before he had gone to sleep. It was strange to see Hyena, ever the energetic individual, seem so at peace beside Alligator. But it was nice to see. Peacemaker, come on, came Tempest's voice. Looking back, he saw that she and Cliff were heading towards the sleeping cave he and Cliff shared with Jaguar. Coming, Peacemaker said, trotting after the two quickly. Once he'd caught up with them, they had already entered the sleeping cave. Sure enough. Ooh, excuse me. That's a good moment to grab a drink, though. Drinking is good for the voice actor. Very healthy stuff, water is. Sure enough, there were three dragons with fully detailed shapes. Peacemaker, Cliff, he wondered if Cliff was as weirded out as he was, seeing their sleeping forms, and Jaguar. Well, Cliff coughed, looking at his sleeping form. Said form had plopped onto his back. Had no idea that's what I looked like when I slept. Focus, please, Focus, please, Tempest muttered as she approached Peacemaker's body. Walking up beside her, Peacemaker glanced at his body. Despite feeling familiar with his own body and looking at reflections of himself in the mirror, looking at his own body from this perspective, he almost did not recognize himself. This created a conflict of emotions through Peacemaker. He knew he was a Rainwing-Nightwing hybrid, but he felt like he was looking at a different dragon. Almost like something was missing. Peacemaker was snapped out of his thoughts as Tempest suddenly spoke. Show me Peacemaker's mind. Show me Peacemaker's mind, Tempest said, her voice sounding very commanding. As he was about to ask her who she was talking to, Peacemaker felt his head grow warm. Turning his attention to his body, he noticed his eyebrows twerk. Then, in front of him, Tempest and Cliff, The three were greeted with a brilliant light that appeared before them, engulfing the surrounding cave. Through the light, Peacemaker saw images flash before the three of them. Images that were all too familiar to him, all showing experiences that Peacemaker vaguely recalled from his dragonethood. The sounds that accompanied these images made Peacemaker realize what he was looking at. He was looking at his memories. I gotta search my job at. Moon! Moon, 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 moon pies. Sleepy. Mommy made me get up so early. At hearing these words, Peacemaker glanced back to see images of Moon. Some of these memories Peacemaker vaguely recalled, being among the earliest he could remember. Seeing Moon's smiling face in his memories made Peacemaker smile to himself, making him remember the times he was very young. "Wow," Cliff said, approaching him from the side. "I have to say, this is kinda cute." Peacemaker could not help but blush at the comments from Cliff. "I was little," Peacemaker said. "As were we all." Cliff chuckled as he turned his attention towards Tempest. Looking back, Peacemaker saw that Tempest was looking intently at a series of memories that flashed before her. Walking towards her, Peacemaker stood beside the sea wing and stared up at the memories. But instead of seeing memories, all Peacemaker could see was darkness. "Peacemaker," Tempest asked, glancing at him, "what was the closest time you were to death before the academy?" Blinking at the question, Peacemaker was taken aback by what she'd said. Peacemaker was taken aback by what she asked. "Oh, what?" Peacemaker asked, unsure of the purpose of the question or what the black images represented. "Where's this coming from?" Cliff asked Tempest. "Where is this coming from?" Cliff asked Tempest suspiciously. Tempest glanced from Peacemaker to Cliff. Tempest glanced from Peacemaker to Cliff, and then back to Peacemaker. "These are memories," she said, gesturing to the darkened image. Gesturing to the darkened images. Looking at... She said, gesturing to the darkened images. Looking at the images, Peacemaker felt his body grow cold the longer he looked into the darkness. Turning back to Tempest, he tried to take his mind off them. Peacemaker stuttered. Peacemaker stuttered. "There was a time I was sick, back when I was little." "Anything else?" Tempest asked. "What caused the illness?" "The healers in the Nightwing and Rainwing villages don't know." "The healers in the Nightwing and Rainwing villages didn't know," Peacemaker said, recalling the time when he was a year old. His head had throbbed, his chest hurt so much, and he could not hold down his food. Kingaju and Moon had brought healers from both villages to help him try to recover. His caretakers told him that the healers had ruled every common illness out, stumping the most skilled healers. Peacemaker's mother was contacted while she was visiting the Mud Kingdom. The Queen wanted her to return to him. The Queen wanted her to return to him because the illness showed no signs of lessening. The healers even suspected that Peacemaker would die. Yet, the day his mother returned home, the illness left as quickly as it had appeared. That was the only time he had been sick. that was the only time he had been sick. Tempest paced in front of Peacemaker and Cliff after hearing his answer, deep in thought. Cliff brushed his wings against Peacemaker's. So, there were a few memories that were blank, Cliff replied. What does this mean? Tempest's gaze shifted back to them. Where there was once curiosity was now concern. Because from what I have seen, the blank memories outnumber the memories that we can see. Because from what I have seen, the blank memories outnumber the memories that we can see, Tempest answered. Peacemaker stared at Tempest in disbelief. She had to be joking. Tempest turned towards the blank mirrors and said, Show us all of Peacemaker's memories. The environment around the three altered again. Now, they stood in a circular space. Thousands of images that represented Peacemaker's memories filled the area, all showing different parts of his life until now. At least, that's what Peacemaker was expecting to see. Of all the images he could see, Peacemaker was greeted with the sight of more blackened images than there were images that were filled with his own memories. Only a small fraction of his memories filled the area, while darkness engulfed most of the environment. Peacemaker felt his feet grow weak upon realizing how many memories that his mind could not recall. Whatever was affecting him, it was not just affecting his dreams and body. It was affecting his mind. Peacemaker looked aimlessly at the blank memories. Seeing all of this made Peacemaker feel empty. Yet, through one of these blank memories, Peacemaker heard a small voice among the memories. This is my mother. Oh wait, hold up. This is my mother. Those are my moons. This is my world. This is my world. Peacemaker? Peacemaker? Tempest's voice. Peacemaker? Tempest's voice and a nudge from her wing snapped Peacemaker out of the trance the voice had caused in him. Looking at the sea wing, Peacemaker could see his friends giving him concerned looks. What is it? Didn't you hear that? Peacemaker asked. The voice sounded alien. And yet, it sounded familiar. But where had he heard it? Whatever he'd heard, Cliff and Tempest had not, as they gave him a confused look. I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything, Cliff said, shaking his head. Nor did I. Nor did I, Tempest added. Frowning, Peacemaker looked at the blank memories again. Seeing all the memories that were blank only made him feel overwhelmed. Can you please make them go away? Peacemaker muttered to Tempest. Without hesitation, Tempest did as he asked, and commanded the images to vanish. After the images disappeared, and the sleeping cave was all that could be seen, Peacemaker sat on the ground, placing his head in his talons. Peacemaker felt empty inside. Okay, Tempest, I've had enough. I've had enough, Cliff said, frustrated. What is behind the blank memories? What is happening to him? What is behind the blank memories? What is happening to him? Beside Peacemaker, he felt Tempest sit down, brushing her wing against his own. My father says that when memories are darkened, they exist in our mind, but something is blocking them out, Tempest explained. Looking up at her, Peacemaker saw the Sea Wing's green eyes look into his blue ones. When this happens, entities from the dream world can interact with these memories and alter them to their liking, even changing a dragon's personality. What causes memories to be darkened in the first place? Cliff asked, walking. So he was in front of Peacemaker. Hearing Cliff sit down, Peacemaker looked up to see his friend giving him an assuring look. Where exactly is this entity? Ooh, pardon me. Then I start acting for a while, especially when I'm reading off a script like, well, narrating a book. Tend to get gas in my stomach and gotta let it out. Where was I? Multiple things, Tempest answered. Most commonly, illnesses that affect the mind. As for the entity, Tempest gestured at Peacemaker's sleeping body, the wards are still in place. I can confirm this. Yet, what we are dealing with is the damage the entity had already caused, but hasn't been repaired. Had this sickness when he was a dragonette affected his mind? It was likely it had come out of nowhere and vanished as soon as it appeared. This entity had affected his mind enough to damage it. Even if it had been repelled, the damage it caused still existed. That explained something. Despite knowing the causes and how much it had affected his memories, now he questioned how much of his dragonettehood that he could not remember did not make him feel better. Did not make him feel any better. How do we undo the damage? Peacemaker muttered. How do I regain these memories? And how can I regain control of who I am? Not what this entity tried to turn me into. We repair the damage here, in the dream world, Tempest explained. Luckily, as a somnus, I can repair it. I just need to learn the right enchantments. I'm sorry. What? Cliff asked, raising a brow. Only animus dragons can make enchantments. In the physical world, they are, Tempest said. In the physical world, they are, Tempest said, smirking at Cliff. But here in the dream world, somnus dragons are the animus dragons. Hearing this, Peacemaker felt the despair and fear he had felt prior disperse. He realized things could get better. He just needed to have faith in Tempest, as she was in her element. So, what's our first step? Peacemaker asked as he stood up with Tempest and Cliff. First thing, we need to find the place where the most recent memories are disrupted, Tempest revealed. If the illness is the cause, then we need to go to the Dreamworld version of the rainforest, and the equivalent of where you suffered from the illness. All right, Peacemaker said. He could not help but allow a hopeful smile to cross his lips. We can do that. Let's head there now, Cliff commented, walking towards the exit of the Dreamworld version. Walking towards the exit of the Dreamworld version of the sleeping cave. Sooner we can help Peacemaker, the better. Quickly following Cliff, Peacemaker and Tempest caught up with the Skywing as they exited the common cave. When you visited my dream, you said time runs slower in the dream world, correct? Cliff asked Tempest. At this, Tempest nodded. So we should be able to help Peacemaker in one visit? So we should be able to help Peacemaker in one visit. Ideally, Tempest answered. But we... Suddenly, the Sea Wing stopped. Looking back at their friend, Peacemaker and Cliff's eyes widened as the glow around Tempest grew faint. Peacemaker and Cliff's eyes widened as the glow around Tempest grew faint. Looking back at Peacemaker and Cliff, Tempest's eyes suddenly grew very tired. Tempest's eyes. Gosh, that's so awkward. Tempest's eyes eyes suddenly grew tired. Tempest groaned. We need to go back. Tempest? Tempest? What's wrong? Tempest? What's wrong? Peacemaker asked. The sudden change in Tempest made him nervous. Go back where? No, time. Tempest groaned, suddenly running past Peacemaker and Cliff. Looking at Cliff, Peacemaker's eyes widened when he saw the red glow around his scales grow dim, just like Tempest's. Looking at his own talons, the blue glow around him was fading. Peacemaker did not know what this meant, but he knew that something was happening, and he was not sure he wanted to know. Peace, let's hurry. Peace, let's hurry, Cliff said, running after Tempest. Nodding, Peacemaker followed his friends. Drawing closer to Cliff and Tempest near the entrance to the dream version of the academy, Peacemaker smashed straight into an invisible force. Falling to the ground by the impact with said force, he felt like he had just run into a stone wall. Groaning, Peacemaker looked up to see that Cliff and Tempest were on the other side of whatever was blocking the entrance. Cliff clawed at the invisible force viciously, while Tempest placed her talons on the field. Both tried to say something from their side of the field, but whatever was in between them was blocking the noise. You are going nowhere! Peacemaker's eyes widened as he heard a familiar whisper in the back of his mind. No, not in the back of his mind. Behind him! Spinning around, Peacemaker saw a shadowy figure of a tall dragon walk through the halls, making his way towards him. At first, he thought the shadowy figure was someone who was awake. And was merely walking the halls of the academy at night. But a closer inspection of the dragon made him realize the shadowy dragon was here, in the dream world, with him. The figure stared at Peacemaker with a pair of amber-colored eyes that radiated a malevolent glow. Instantly, Peacemaker recognized the eyes. They were the same pair of eyes that belonged to what was dragging him. They were the same pair of eyes that belonged to what was attempting to drag him into the dream world. The same individual Tempest had saved him from. Feeling his heart beat rapidly, Peacemaker spun back to the invisible barrier and attempted to claw at it with his talons. On the opposite side, he saw Tempest directly in front of him, placing her talons over the barrier. He saw her lips calmly move, repeating an unheard word repeatedly. Despite her appearing calmer than Cliff, he could see tears well up in her eyes as she looked into Peacemaker's. Peacemaker then felt the chill run down his spine. Turning around, Peacemaker's eyes widened in horror. The shadow-covered dragon was gone. In his place stood the walking corpse of an Icewing. With a mortal injury in his stomach. No, Peacemaker whispered, his voice quivering weakly as he felt his back press into the invisible barrier. No! No! The Icewing stared down at him with his dead eyes, just as his serrated talons swiped down towards Peacemaker. The Icewing stared down at him with his dead eyes, just as his serrated talons swiped down towards Peacemaker. Oof! Peacemaker exclaimed as he felt the pair of talons yank him back to the ground. Looking behind him, Peacemaker saw Cliff and Tempest dragging him Peacemaker saw Cliff and Tempest dragging him away from the academy entrance. Go! Go! You need to go! Wait, who is this? Right, I know this was, I had to get into a southern drawl for this one, so I chose this earlier. Go! You need to go! Wait, that's female, too. Heck. Go! You need to go! If I want to get into a southern drawl, you just gotta do a little bit of something like that, too, to get it set up. Go! You need to go! A female voice Peacemaker did not recognize shouted from behind him. Peacemaker glanced back to see a new dragon running towards the edge of the cliff. Blinking, he saw that the dragon had gray scales, and, the most striking part of the dragon's figure, 2 pairs of wings, one pair larger than the other, with patterns that resembled a butterfly's wings. A pair of butterfly-like wings? A silk wing? Unlike Cliff, Tempest, and Peacemaker, who all had an aura around them, this dragon did not have any light glowing from her body. Who are you? Who are you? Cliff yelled after the Silkwing as she left the 3. No! The roar from the nightmarish Icewing came from the academy entrance, who now bolted out of the academy entrance and onto the cliff as the dragons. And onto the cliff with the dragons. You will not leave! Peacemaker looked back to the Icewing as it pounced toward him. Repel! Tempest shouted. The next thing Peacemaker knew, an invisible force smashed into the Icewing, knocking the Icewing further back a few feet. Peacemaker then saw Tempest step in front of him, wrapping a wing around her and Cliff, just as the Icewing recovered and rushed at them again. Return! Were the last words Peacemaker heard from Tempest before everything around him turned white. His body rolled off of his sleeping platform with a loud thump. Gah! Gah! Peacemaker shouted in fright as he opened his eyes and jumped up. What the? Came the startled shout of Jaguar from across the cave. Ignoring Jaguar's surprise, Peacemaker, remembering everything that had occurred moments ago, stared toward where Cliff slept. Despite not falling off of his sleeping platform, Cliff's eyes were wide open with the same amount of shock and fright as Peacemaker's. What's wrong? Jaguar said, surprised at seeing Peacemaker on the floor. Did you have a nightmare? Did you have a nightmare? Taking a moment to regain his composure, not wanting to tell Jaguar what had transpired, that he, Cliff, and Tempest had been to the dream world, shook his head after he calmed. No, I'm fine, Peacemaker said, calmly. Just a vivid dream. Jaguar gave Peacemaker a skeptical look, before looking back at Cliff, who appeared calm. Despite visibly doubting what Peacemaker said, Jaguar at least did not pressure. Well, you know to talk to us, right? Jaguar asked, to which Peacemaker nodded with an appreciative smile. Though, underneath this smile, Peacemaker felt a combination of feelings. He did not want to lie to his classmate about the excursion into the dream world, which, very well, almost culminated into a fatal encounter with the very entity that was affecting his mind. But he and Cliff and Tempest agreed that it would be safest if only they went to the dream world. After the first visit, Peacemaker understood why. Satisfied with his nod, Jaguar slowly went back to sleep. Getting back onto his sleeping platform, Peacemaker shifted his body. So he rested. Huh? So he laid curled up facing Cliff. From their respective sides of the sleeping cave, Peacemaker and Cliff's eyes stared into each other. Peacemaker wished he could talk with Cliff, like with telepathy, about what had happened. But he wanted to wait when it was just the two of them and Tempest. Hours passed, and sleep did not come to either Peacemaker or Cliff. When the sun had risen and the morning gong had rung, Peacemaker and Cliff were quick to get up before the others. Despite greeting their winglet, Peacemaker and Cliff waited outside of the cave patiently for Tempest. Once the Seawing had finally stepped out, Peacemaker and Cliff were about to bombard her with thousands of questions. Until they noticed that the Seawing's eyelids were dark and half-lidded, almost as though she had not slept. "Tempest?" Peacemaker asked quietly, as Hyena and Alligator walked out of the cave to go about their routines. Stepping towards her, he placed a wing over the Seawing. What's wrong?" What's wrong?" Tempest looked away from the two, rubbing her eyes with her talons. "Come on," she yawned. "Let's get to breakfast." With that, Tempest brushed past Peacemaker and Cliff, quickly walking down the halls of the academy, all the while swaying tiredly. Peacemaker looked at Cliff with concern. All the while, the Skywing Prince stared after her with curiosity. In silence, the two friends followed Tempest. "What happened?" Cliff asked as he passed Tempest with some fish. "The Icewing and Silkwing? What was all that?" "I don't understand about the Silkwing," Tempest replied as she cut off a piece of fish and ate it. "All I know is that her presence in the dream world differs from ours." Sitting from across Tempest, Peacemaker watched the Seawing eagerly eat her breakfast. The dark circles around her eyes had largely disappeared, but Tempest still appeared exhausted. It seemed, by eating and explaining, she at least forgot she was tired. "What do you mean, differs from ours?" Peacemaker asked. Tempest looked up from her food towards Peacemaker. "The aura of light we had around us?" Tempest asked, to which both Peacemaker and Cliff nodded. "It represents our protection while traversing in the dream world. How long our minds can handle being away from our bodies." Tempest paused for a moment, frowning as she went into deep thought. Before mind rot kicks in." "Mind rot?" Peacemaker asked, hesitantly. "A term one of my ancestors coined," Tempest muttered. "It's a term that describes how a somnus can enter the dream world, but the longer they stay away from their body, the greater the strain our mind will endure." "That's what you meant by wanting to do things quickly," Cliff realized. "Back when you entered my dream, you were not concerned about us wasting time before dawn." I was concerned about how long my mind could handle the strain," Tempest responded, nodding. "If I stayed in the dream world for too long, then it would be difficult for me to return to my body." For a moment, Tempest stopped to look at both Cliff and Peacemaker, her gaze filled with guilt. Then I could not get you both back to the waking world." Upon hearing this, Peacemaker realized just how closely the three of them had reached the point of no return. During their first venture into the dream world, they had come close to not being able to return to their bodies. "So, what now?" Peacemaker asked, reaching out his talons to touch her own. Tempest slowly wrapped her talons around his own. Looking up at him, Peacemaker saw her lips curve into a smile. "First, we go about the rest of our day. I'll ready myself for our next venture into the dream world," Tempest explained. "Then we travel to the rainforest of the dream world, and we figure out how to restore the memories." Realizing that Tempest had not given up on him, Peacemaker smiled back at her. She was still willing to help. He was nervous, especially after what had happened. Yet knowing Tempest would still help him gave him some confidence. Confidence that things would go back to normal. Frick. Oh, heck. Okay, so the last 10 minutes, I didn't notice that I clicked off into here instead of my Adobe Audition, so the markers were not being placed. Joy. Alright, well, how long is chapter 15? Is it something I can do quickly? It is very much something I can do quickly, so let's do that real quick. Because I am feeling it. Alright, need some water. Tab out. Stretch this out so I can work with it a bit better. Name it chapter 14. Alright, and grab some quick drinks. This one won't take long to record. And then I'll go go through and show you guys how I edit these. Chapter 15. Despite everything that had happened, Peacemaker felt that he was taking things pretty well. His mind was affected by an entity from another world. He had recurring nightmares of a dead Icewing that threatened to kill him in said nightmare. His first journey into the dream world almost went catastrophically bad. Yet, despite all of that, he had not lost his mind. He was perfectly calm, spoke to his friends like he would every day, and attended his classes as per usual. Everything was fine. Perfect. Nothing was wrong. Heck. I'm gonna redo a lot of that. He was perfectly calm, spoke to his friends like he would every day, and attended his classes as per usual. Everything was fine. Perfect. Nothing was wrong. At least, that was what he wanted to convince. At least, that was what he wanted to convince himself of. Anyways. Deep inside, Peacemaker was not okay. He was confused. So many questions swirled in his mind like a swarm of bees. There was confidence that things would return back to normal, but he could not shake the fear that was deep inside of him. This fear was minor, but it was present like the moons that hung in the night sky. You didn't need to look at the moons to know that they were hanging in the sky. When he returned to the waking world with Tempest and Cliff, he had tried his best to keep so much bottled up inside. The growing fear of sleep, what was happening in the dream world, and the danger he posed to Cliff and Tempest. The thought of possibly hurting them again scared him to death. As Peacemaker sat in the common cave, he tried to keep his attention focused on the scroll he had been reading silently to himself. Yet, his mind would eventually wander to his first visit to the dream world. The many questions he had constantly plaguing him and wanting to surface. Throughout the day, he had wanted to ask Tempest so many questions. Yet, for some reason, whenever he wanted to ask the questions, his mind would blank and almost forget the questions. Instead, Cliff would ask questions, and Tempest would answer them. Meanwhile, Peacemaker would remain silent. In order to keep the frustration that he felt suppressed, he instead kept his attention on the scrolls he read, trying to take solace in the fictional adventures of the Blizzard Wings. For the most part, It had worked. Until Tempest and Ermine stepped into the cave. "Now I'm wondering if you're getting enough sleep," Ermine muttered as he stepped into the common cave first. Oop, that says he. It should be he. Ermine muttered as she stepped into the common cave first, with Tempest following close behind with a bag of books and scrolls. I can assure you, Ermine, I am, Tempest muttered, sparing a glance at the ceiling. Peacemaker noticed that, contrary to how she had appeared the day before, Tempest's eyes were back to their regular shade of aqua green, rather than appearing heavy and tired. I am assuming it's a somnus thing, then? Ermine asked, raising a curious brow at her. You didn't wake up like you normally do. In a way, it is a somnus thing, Tempest explained, her attention turning back to Peacemaker, giving him a polite smile. But I'm feeling okay. Good. That's good, Ermine nodded. You should tell me more about the dream world. I think you owe me that much. Hearing that the conversation was turning towards the dream world, Peacemaker's head perked up. Deep inside, he felt the urge to ask questions about the dream world. He wanted to summon the will to ask. But, yet, as he tried to agree with Ermine, Peacemaker felt his mouth snap shut, almost like he could not ask the question. I promised I'd tell you more, Tempest insisted. Now just isn't the right time. And when will be a good time? Ermine insisted, her brows furrowing. Just ask. But he shouldn't. It wasn't right to know. He had a right to know. No, he didn't. Actually? Peacemaker managed to squeak, managing to ignore the urges that told him to keep quiet. His words caused Tempest and Ermine to look at him, both surprised that he had taken his attention from his book. Seeing their eyes giving him a surprised expression, Peacemaker managed to say more. I am curious about it, as well. Something inside of him almost made him take back what he had said, but he resisted. He stood by what he'd said, and he wanted to know more. While Tempest blinked at him, surprised that he spoke up, she eventually nodded. She most likely knew that, while they had traveled to the dream world, he still did not know much about it. He hoped she could answer the questions without having to tell Ermine that they had traveled to it, not wanting to drag others into this, as, according to Tempest, the more individuals she took into not wanting to drag others into this, as, according to Tempest, the more individuals she took with her into the dream world, the greater risk everyone would get lost, and the sooner they needed to return to the real world. Very well, Tempest muttered, approaching the center of the common cave. Since you've been most affected by the dream world, Peacemaker, what is it you are curious about? Surprisingly, Peacemaker did not feel the sensation that his mind wanted to tear him apart for inquiring about the dream world. He felt at ease now. Taking the opportunity to ask, he did just that. Is it possible to enter the dream world? Physically, I mean, Peacemaker asked. This question was very clear to Tempest, and it was voiced in a way that did not arouse Ermine's suspicions. After seeing the Silkwing in the dream world, whom Tempest was surprised to even see, must have entered the dream world through a different method that he did not know about. No, there isn't, Tempest explained. Every dragon crosses over into the dream world when they sleep, before the dreams even start. But to have a dragon physically cross over? No, it's not possible. Hence why it's called the dream world, Ermine noted, giving Peacemaker a glance that was meant to clearly say something along the lines of, duh. Duh. Indeed, it should be obvious, Peacemaker noted, but the Silkwing, unlike Peacemaker and the others, lacked a glowing aura around her body. It meant she had no protection like they did from the mental strain. Yet, she seemed perfectly fine, based on how swiftly she had flown away. While Peacemaker was thinking of the Silkwing, Ermine had started speaking. What I'm curious about is the extent of a Somnus' abilities, Ermine inquired. This made Tempest raise a brow at the Icewing. Yes. I knew... Yes. I know you said your powers are the greatest in the dream world, but even an animus who has not mastered their magic has their limits. So, what are your limits? Peacemaker admitted that he was curious about this. He had never met another Somnus before. Tempest was the only one he knew. Well, for one, the amount of time I can spend in the dream world is much shorter than my father, Tempest admitted. From there, she explained to Ermine what she had told him and Cliff the other day. The limitation was not based on age. More so around how well a Somnus' mind could handle being away from their body. Hopefully, the more I practice, the longer I can remain in the dream world, Tempest explained, her tail swishing to the side ever so slowly, as she likely thought about her abilities. My father has been known to travel the dream world for as long as 3 months. My father has been known to travel to the dream world for as long as 3 months, whereas I can only stay there for a few hours. 3 months? Peacemaker thought to himself, amazed. From his first visit to the dream world, he couldn't imagine staying in an odd place for a long time. I take it he has greater control over his magic? Peacemaker inquired. Immense, Tempest nodded, smiling to herself as she looked up at the ceiling. To the point he can freely enter the dreams of others and see what he wants to see without having to fully enter the dream world. What do you mean? Ermine raised an eyebrow when she heard this. Can't you see whatever you want while in another person's dreams? Can't you see whatever you want while in another person's dreams? Tempest shook her head at this. No, not as a novice. Tempest glanced at Peacemaker. When Peacemaker was having his nightmares, I could only see what his dreams were showing him, while I was in the dream world. A pause for a moment occurred, as Peacemaker saw Tempest's eyes close tight for a bit. He wondered if she was recalling his nightmares, or their adventure in the dream world. Finally, her eyes opened as she visibly calmed. More experienced Somnuses can freely wander a dragon's dream, rather than just manipulating or viewing them. My father can enter one's dreams, and briefly use the dreams as a window into the dragon's mind. I can't do that, yet. I can view and alter dreams, ward off certain dreams as well, but beyond that, I can't wander a dragon's dreams freely. At this, Tempest frowned. Honestly? Nor would I want to, Tempest muttered. Peacemaker was confused about why she would think that it's not like she would do anything. Hold up, I did not. Peacemaker was confused about why she would think that it's not like she would do anything bad if she were to gaze into one's mind. Moon was a mind reader, and she was largely respectful of the privacy of those around her. It seemed Ermine largely shared this sentiment with Tempest. In the end, Peacemaker was eager to change the subject for all of them. He figured what better way than to ask a question that truly was on his mind. So, what lives in the dream world? Peacemaker asked, curiously. You mentioned that it has inhabitants. At this, Tempest seemed to look confused. At first, Peacemaker thought it was because she did not understand the question, despite it being rather clear. But then he realized that the way she opened her mouth and closed it as if wanting to speak, but not finding the words. "It's complicated," Tempest muttered. "How so, exactly?" Ermine asked, once again raising a curious brow. "There are inhabitants in the world," Tempest explained, "but they aren't like us, who are made of flesh and bone. They are more like beings of sound or light." "Excuse me?" the Icewing asked, blinking in confusion. "Sound or light?" Peacemaker repeated. "The dream world does not follow the same rules that our world does," Tempest said, clarifying to Ermine, while also silently expanding on what Peacemaker, Tempest, and Cliff had witnessed. "The same applies to those native inhabitants of the dream world. They are made up of what my father calls resonance. When you're in the dream world, the beings normally can't be seen, but they can be heard. I am assuming that based on the sound it will determine the personality of these inhabitants?" Ermine asked. "Correct," Tempest nodded. "Once these beings have touched the mind of those visiting the dream world, they then use some form of light to create an appearance." Or shadows? A thought came through Peacemaker's mind as he thought back on the dragon covered in darkness back in the dream world when he and the others had been attacked. The dragon's amber-colored eyes stuck in the back of his mind. "Peacemaker!" Ermine's voice drew Peacemaker back into reality. Blinking, Peacemaker glanced at both of his friends and noticed they were looking at him as if expecting him to say something. What?" "Did you have something else to ask?" Tempest asked. Shaking his head, Peacemaker gave Tempest an appreciative smile. "No, I'm good." "No, I'm good." At this, Tempest nodded. "I'm glad that I could answer some questions." "Are you all right?" Tempest inquired as the two made their way towards the Academy's underground lake. Oh, there's supposed to be a gap. There's the author did not include a transition between these two scenes because Ermine vanishes up. Yeah. "Are you all right?" Tempest inquired as the two made their way towards the Academy's underground lake. "I was a bit surprised when you wanted to ask questions." "Yeah, I am," Peacemaker nodded. There was a lot on my mind, and I wanted to ask." "Why didn't you before?" "Honestly," Peacemaker bit the inner side of his cheek. "I have no idea." Looking away from Tempest, he kept his eyes focused on the tunnel in front of them. After what we learned, my memories being blotted out, I'm not sure anymore. Suddenly, he was stopped by Tempest placing her talons over his forearm, stopping him in place. Looking up at the sea wing, Peacemaker was greeted with the sight of Tempest giving him a determined look. "I promised I would help you, and I will," Tempest insisted. "I'm not going to abandon you. You have every right to ask me questions, and I will do my best to answer them." At this, Peacemaker felt the calmness wash over him. Hearing Tempest reaffirm her words made him feel all the more secure. Nodding, Peacemaker closed his eyes and thought for a moment. "What do you think happened to the memories that were blocked?" Peacemaker asked, getting to the one question he wanted to know. What could that thing want? I don't know. I don't know, Tempest muttered, but she continued. But once we go back to the dream world, the more I can learn, the more answers I will have. As Peacemaker's gaze went to the ground, he stopped as Peacemaker's gaze went to the ground, and he stopped as he felt Tempest's wings brush against his own. Peacemaker, we will find answers. Like that, Peacemaker believed the Sea Wing. As they continued their way down to the underground lake to rejoin half of their winglet, Peacemaker felt a small pang of doubt fill his mind. Yes, he knew they would get answers. But, if he were honest, would he like the truth? There we go. 1 second, I'm going to turn some fans on because I am boiling. Alright, so what we are going to do after the bookmark is I am going to show you. I just need to adjust for that to fit. And now I can turn VC face on. On the shorter version, so on the chapter 15, I'm going to show you guys my process for how, basically what I do after I record. So now that's situated. Cool, let's get down to business. Alright, so as you see here, there's a bunch of different markers here as you're going along. And some of them are really close together. Like these two. The way I mark these things is I will use one tick. So I just made another marker right here, 39. And that means I made a mistake. 2 ticks next to each other, so 40 and 41 here, means that there's a gap in the recording. So I took a moment to pause, breathe, and get back in. That way I can go back through and adjust the, well, poorly spaced items. So here's an example of the break moment. So I knew I needed to like swallow, clear my throat for a moment. So I just marked it double twice, did that, reset, and then got back into it. And then probably made a mistake, so I made another marker here. So I'm going to run a diagnostics. This will remove a lot of minor clicks and things in my audio, which will be good. Yes, it does help, but not very much. I've never really noticed an auditory difference. Mostly because in order for me to notice them, I needed a good before and after. And because it grabs from the entire group, I don't get that experience. But I have noticed when I jack settings up what it does, so I will take it. Beginning. Chapter 15. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna come over here, find my mistake. Heck. So I burped here. I'm gonna redo a lot of that. He was perfectly calm. Spoke to his friends. So I'm gonna look for it. He was perfectly calm as I look back over here. So I think it might be this. He was perfectly calm. Yep. Cool. So I can just grab this and I'll just delete all of that. Look at the mistake. At least that was what he wanted. At least. There we go. Delete. Next one. With Tempest and Cliff. When he returned to the... You didn't need to look at the moons to know that they were hanging in the sky. When he returned to the waking world with Tempest and Clift. Okay, so it's waking world with Tempest and Clift. Turn to the waking world with Tempest. Okay, this was a poorly done moment to redo the line here. With when he returned to the waking world with Tempest and Cliff. Yeah, you hear the auditory difference? So I actually am going to want to redo that line real quick. When he returned to the waking world with yeah, I mean, this is where with starts. And that does not, I did not do a good job of putting my voice back into it. Like, capturing the same cadence and vocal levels and things. Normally I'm pretty good at it, but when it's right in the middle of a segment like this, I did not choose the right spot to restart that tag at. I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna hit record. When he returned to the waking world with Tempest and Cliff. When he returned to the waking world with Tempest and Cliff. When he returned to the waking world with Tempest and Cliff. Some lag made that not happen. When he returned to the waking world with Tempest and Cliff. Okay, cool. So yeah, the background audio is a Cliff. Background audio is a bit, well, you can see that difference there, but I should be able to just come over here. Actually, yeah, so grab all that. All right, lower these decibels a bit so it's not noticeable. With Tempest and Cliff, he had tried his best to keep... Cool, so now I just need to delete this mistake. And we'll delete some of this gap as well. With Tempest and Cliff, he had tried his best to keep so... Cool. The many questions he had... The many questions he... Just delete that. The many questions he had... Ermine muttered as she stepped... Ermine muttered as he stepped in... I can assure you... I can assure you, Ermine, it's here, okay. I am... That won't take me long because it's a shorter audio clip. Okay. But I'm feeling okay. But I'm feeling okay. But I'm feeling okay. It's a bit more forceful than I would normally like, but it doesn't matter as much for this because I'm not getting paid for this. This is just a for me project. So I just take note of it. Cool. That's something I can improve on, and I will do better next time. Hearing that the conversation... Hearing that the... He wanted to... Yet, as he tried... So this one's gonna be yet. That one's probably a burp of some sort. But, yet... Oh, right, no, it was this moment when it was like but and get next to each other, and that didn't make sense at all, so I just removed one of them. I promise. Also, all three of these are I promise. So I'll just delete all three. No, two of them. Actually? Even though sometimes it looks like it should be really obvious as to what I'm doing, I like to listen to them again anyway, just to make sure. Both surprised that... Like, if you look at these two, this audio to that audio, you can see very similar vocal patterns. You got a big one, it kind of shrinks for two smaller ones. I got a big fat one. You can see over here, a big one, two smaller ones, a big fat one. And get some spikes in the middle, So like these are obviously the same audio clip.
Both surprised.
But I'll still check.
Both surprised that he had to take.
And when they sound so similar, that means I did a good job. Because, well, they match that well.
As according. Not one. Surprisingly.
Okay.
Not wanting to drag others into this.
Wait.
As according to Tempest, the more.
Oh, okay. So this is where the real new take starts.
Not wanting to. He hoped she could answer the questions without having to tell Ermine that they had traveled to it. Not wanting the others. Not wanting to drag up.
Cool. So it's just not wanting there. I'm not wanted.
Surprisingly, Peacemaker did.
Yeah, like same.
Surprisingly,
I already know it's gonna be that, but I still double check.
Peacemaker, whom Tempest.
This I think it's gonna be.
Whom Tempest.
Yep. I am good.
Whom Tempest. Duh.
Alright, I just wanted to.
Duh.
Yeah, I accidentally made this duh sound more like the Russian or German. I don't actually know which. Duh. Duh, Comrade General. So okay, that's German. Russian, I mean. I think German actually doesn't say
It
anything
meant
too.
she had no protection
Wait.
like they did.
I really wish I knew slang better for
It meant
accents.
she had no protection. It meant she had no protection like they did. Yes, yes. Yes, yes. I knew. Yes, yes. I knew. But even an animus was.
We're about halfway
My
through here.
father.
When I first was doing
My
this,
father.
I went too fast with the narration, which led to a lot more mistakes, and it was just overall a worse experience to listen to.
Can't you see what?
But with slowing down and focusing on making sure I'm delivering everything well,
Can't you?
I got a lot fewer mistakes. Which means that, well, I got an act. It's when I first started, there were like you could barely see black. There were so many markers. The only reason you could see black was because these markers are dotted lines. It was that bad.
Ward off certain dreams as well. Ward off certain dreams. Peacemaker was confused.
Oh. Do that. Make sure I can.
Peacemaker was
Okay, good. Now it's good to delete it, but
confused.
wanted to double check.
Why? At this?
Yeah, it's gonna be. Yeah, this is also gonna say at this.
At this.
Yep.
Tempest seemed
Ooh, that's a rather large gap. Is this supposed to be here?
and closed it as if wanting to speak, but not finding the words. It's complicated.
It could be a bit. That one's not an awkward place necessarily to have a break. It's a bit too long there.
I am assuming that when he and the other when he and the dream world
Interesting audio effect that got forced in there. Little glitch of the mic.
no I'm good. Oh, there's supposed to be a gap. There's the author did not include a transition between these two scenes because or mine vanishes up. Yeah.
Yep, I remember this part of the book. So I gave myself a lot of empty space I could use to fine tune it.
Are you all right? Are you all right?
So this spot, I actually want a large break. That way the audience is listening and they're like, huh,
At this, Tempest nodded.
there's a break,
I'm
something's
glad
changing,
that could answer some questions.
and they're able to catch up and recalibrate their brains,
Are
per
you
se.
alright? Tempest inquired.
So basically a larger break usually indicates a scene change, a chapter change, or something.
After what
And it's just a good way to do it.
Peacemaker bit. Honestly,
Alright, so we've got a gap here, which tells me that if I were to look for a mistake in these lines back here, I would not find it. And that's why I include those markers. So knowing that, and I actually already looked at this area, I'm looking at just this, I know that those are going to be mistakes.
one question he wanted to know.
Just delete that right then.
What could that thing want? I don't know.
Okay, that one should have a bit...
One question he wanted. That.
This should have a bit more space between that to allow the audience to process what he asked, and then a response.
Peacemaker's gaze went to the ground. He stopped. As Peacemaker's gaze went to the ground. Peacemaker.
Ooh.
Peacemaker. Like that.
Okay,
Peacemaker.
so that was all the mistakes edited out. Now I'm going to come back in here. Well, the controls are not always the best. Let's make sure that this is rammed all the way up against the side there. And that will let me know that I can just pull that out, and that is the entirety of it. So that one is only a little 18-minute one. So I've got chapter 14 I need to edit down. So I'm going to come into chapter 13, copy a random bit of audio that looks about the middle of the pack. Drag that in here. Paste it on the end. And now I can select everything else. Yoink. Peacemaker felt a small pang of doubt. Shade Hunter. Whoops, Shade Hunter said as she looked over at him. Oh, Peacemaker. Peacemaker's gaze went to the ground. Okay. Ooh, wait, no. A bit softer ground. And he stopped aloud, much to Shade Hunter's agreement about it. Shade Hunter muttered. Alright, so now there's going to be some variation at this point. That's fine. Giving him a determined look. Cool. Sweet. Okay, so that's audio level matched. And...
But, if you were honest, would he like the truth?
Now I can come here. Delete that. And now is my time to go through and make sure all of my audio isn't too loud.
How so, exactly?
Like this. If I can like come in here and drop say that much and then tweak it down a few decibels. That way it feels a bit better on the ears.
It's complicated, Tempest muttered. How so, exactly?
There we go. Apparently, my chapter 14. Chapter 15. Let's get rid of the click of the button. Chapter 15. Yeah, so this one, even though it gets all the way up to the highest point in the entire thing, it doesn't actually feel that bad on your ears because of what frequencies are hitting those numbers. Chapter 15. But I would like to lower it a bit. Chapter 15. Let's see. So I looked at all the top. Now for the bottom. This is the one that goes the farthest from the bottom. So what is...
Very well.
And the sooner they needed to return to the real world.
Very well.
Yeah, so well feels a bit, or like it shouldn't necessarily be additional volume. So we're going to select this stuff and a little bit.
Very well.
Still
Tempest
it is,
muttered.
but less of, it feels less dramatic.
Good.
Oh, there's a lot of sound pre this. So this is a little button that's called clean, I think. You can use it to select a box. Good. In the spectrogram. And it's designed to just clean that area up. So you see that line right there? I can put a box right through that. Hit Z. And poof, it's gone. It's called heal, I think. Good. That's good. Alright, so that is this done. Now I will take this, save it, and then I will file. You can't see this now, but I'm going to export the file. Name it appropriately. So this one is chapter 15. Done before 14 is done. That's now exported and saved. Pop back over to the multi-track. I'll do chapter 14 on my own off stream because that is, yeah, make sure I save everything. You guys don't need to worry about that. There's a lot of, it'll take a lot more time to get through. But because right now I'm going to go show you what I do after I do this. What's the next step afterwards? I need to open up Adobe After Effects. This program can do a lot of cool stuff. And this is how I get my spectrograms. The Adobe products always take a little time to boot up, though. So, sad. Okay. It's loading. Alright, choose the Darkest Eclipse project. Okay, now let me show you. Here we are. So this is what this is what my project title looks like. So here is the profile picture that I have. You can see around the edge, you got the little things, the little doohickamajigs that spike when there's audio. Text. So first off, adjust that to chapter 15. Then I'm going to delete, remove from the timeline, chapter 13. I'm going to go into my computer, File Explorer, grab Find 15, drag it in here. 15. That's how long it is. So we are going to need to grab this bar here, shrink it down, zoom in, okay, make sure it's cut all that. Sweet. Now I need to click on this specific object, go to Effects, and adjust that to chapter 15. And so this is the object that controls the spectrogram. And whenever I add a new audio file, I need to reassign this to the new audio file. All the settings are saved. It's nice and convenient. It's already all matched up and synced. The practice, the longer I can remain in
With the
my
dream
audio.
world.
Love it.
Tempest explained.
What the frick?
Just swishing to the side ever
So slowly, as she likely... I'm sorry, what just happened? Bend in the dream world is much shorter
than my father.
Tempest admitted.
From there, she explained to
Ermine. Okay, so it's just having issues playing the audio because my computer's doing so much right now. So, with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and end stream so I can export this and get this ready to be released, and then either I'll continue working on chapter 14 tonight or take a break from it, do something else, whatever. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Literally, I got 3 messages in chat, which is fine. I didn't expect a lot of people talking for this project, this particular stream. I plan to link this in the VOD, so hopefully you guys will enjoy being able to see my process and how I produce my chapters. So, hope you guys enjoyed chapter 15 and chapter 14. This will go public probably at the same... This VOD will go public at the same time chapter 15 goes public. I don't know when exactly that will be. Because I did more this week than I normally am able to, it might go up sooner than normal. Or heck, I might even upload this on its own and not to worry about.